Only a couple months now. I think I recognize her.
Welcome to The Truth in This Art Beyond. And we're back in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. I am your host, Rob Lee. Thanks for listening, sharing, subscribing, all that good stuff that you all do to keep this podcast going. Today, I'm excited to be in conversation with my next guest, a visual artist, photographer, writer, arts educator whose figurative work often features brown skin in an array of hues, usually set against lush textures and vibrant colors. Please welcome, fellow Robert, by the way, please welcome Robert Carter. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is great already.
So thank you for coming on and making the time. And, you know, before we get into the main crux of the conversation, the main topic, I want to start off and, you know, kind of give you the space. What's been the highlight of your week? Tell me about your week.
Yeah. You know, so a highlight, I'll say, yesterday, there's been a few. I've had a pretty good week. I was on my way to a teaching gig, and I was in an Uber, and my driver, he picked me up from my studio, and on the front of it says like artist studio or something. Yeah. And it's like this older dude, and he's just like, "Oh, is there any space in there?" And I was like, "No, what are you looking for? A studio?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I draw." And he was telling me that he stopped drawing. He's a cartoonist. He stopped drawing for 50 years, and just recently picked it back up, and like has found a whole new passion for it. He was like showing me, I mean, he had one hand on the phone and one hand on the wheel. So I was like, all right, you know, calm down a little. He was excited, you know. But he was like, yeah, man, I just, you know, art, I realized I got back into it, and a friend reminded me of it. And I was just like, that was really inspiring. Yeah. So, and unexpected. I just would never have, like, I don't know. Usually I'm in the Uber, headphones in, shades on, looking out the window, you know. So it was nice to connect, and yeah, it was really inspiring.
That's dope. It's great to be able to tap in and connect with people and hear that sort of stuff. I don't know why I had a brief moment, because I kind of got it. You're a bit of a, we're in the same little tribe. And for some reason, I thought of the creative version of Marv from Sin City saying, "You never know what you find down the alleys, the creative alleys of Philadelphia." But yeah, it's great when you're able to talk with people and you're not expecting it. You know, you're not expecting to hear some like creative origin story. Yeah. You know, like every now and again, you hear some things that are a little weird, like. I talked with my dad one time, and we never really talk about creative stuff. He's like, "Oh, you do that thing, you know, the mic thing." That's literally what it's called, the mic thing. And it used to be the drawing thing, it used to be the writing thing, what have you. Mm-hmm. And I remember, and it's not necessarily creative related, but when you're kind of getting something from an unexpected source, he was like, "Yeah, you know, back in the day, we used to have this Ouija board." And I was like, "Hold up, what?" I was like, "What else are you into? What is this other part of your history?" And, you know, he would be the type that could say, "Yeah, you know, 50 years ago." I was like, "What is this?"
That's amazing. I mean, that's also like the benefit of having intergenerational like relationships, connections, that sort of thing too. Like I learned, like my great grandma I didn't know until I was a teenager. We were pretty close. I didn't know she wanted to be an artist. You know, I didn't know she like picked up a book and just like sketched the cover of it. She's like, "Hand me a piece of paper and a pencil." I'm like, "This whole time you could do this and you didn't even, you know," just like, it's amazing what you know, people have their history and you just never know.
Yeah. I remember, you know, at one point I had an uncle I never met. He passed before I was born. And so I would talk with him. I remember one occasion talking with my grandmother about him, and she was talking about, like, "You got a little drawing talent. Like, you know, we got to definitely, you know, make that happen. We got to make that happen." Mm-hmm. You remind me of my Rudy, and my brother is also named Rudy. So it's kind of that. And what I used to do was, I would get the Wizard magazines. That is definitely check it out.
Wait a minute. What are the Wizard magazines? You got to tell me, like the team, like the.
Oh no, this is like pop culture comics. This is like a comics magazine.
Oh, okay.
So what I would do is draw the covers. I would try to draw the whole cover. So you'll get like this wild cover with like Magneto and Wolverine on there. You're like, I'm trying to draw this whole thing and make sure you get that font right on Wizard. Nice. So for those who are undipped, unfamiliar, could you tell them a bit about your work? Like, what is your work about? Because I gave the sort of cut and paste. I want to hear it from you.
Yeah, sure. Undipped is a great word. Yeah, I'm a photographer, visual artist. I I don't know. I feel like I don't have an elevator pitch per se, but I'll say that I'm really inspired by people. I'm really inspired by love and the moments that connect us. So I feel like a lot of that shows up in my work, and I'm also inspired by history and culture and music, and again, all those things that connect us and define us. And so those are the things that drew me to photography, storytelling. So I would say I'm a visual storyteller, and then also commercially, I help people look their best.
Okay. I like it. I remember during this period, I was talking with folks who are definitely doing photography on folks that look like you and I, getting the browns right, as I like to say it. So, if you will, definitely include a bit of that, because I want to really key in on that. But share with us your process, whether it be commercial side, whether it be your non-commercial projects. Tell us a bit about that. Sure.
Well, yes, definitely. And I will say, like, I'm trying not to use the buzzword diversity, but it just right. I know. I'm just like
get the chills.
Yeah, seriously. But I mean, it really. I'll say like my upbringing really informed my aesthetic sensibilities. Like, I grew up in Maryland in the suburbs, and my family was very colorful, like very charismatic. Like, we sing and do impressions, and just like there's always music in the house, and there's colors. There was at one point our kitchen was, all the walls were like canary yellow, and like my room was like Smurf blue, and like so, and like it's, my relatives are like that. A lot of my relatives are like that too. We just like vibrant things, and celebrate life. And so a lot of the artwork that we had, I grew up with like Ernie Barnes prints and Annie Lee paintings, stuff around like that. That just kind of depicted Black people in their everyday life, just living, like, cleaning chitlins or being at the table or just out dancing. Right, I'm not a chitlin person myself.
You threw it out there, though. I like it.
I did, but that was one of the. So in our kitchen, my mom she was a big Annie Lee fan. We had a lot of her works, but there was one about cleaning chitlins. I think it was called 60 Pounds. It's like a lady at the sink. And I'm not gonna yuck somebody's yum.
I'm hearing Southern roots through a lot of stuff that you're saying. It's the same.
Oh, absolutely.
My grandmother's doing the same thing.
So it's now my grandma makes the chitlins, because we did it once. You know what? I think we're getting.
No, please.
Okay, yeah. My grandma makes the chitlins now, because we made it one year. My mom made it one year for Christmas, and my sister woke up in the middle of the night thinking that she had like thrown up on herself, and she was like, made this whole scene, and my mom was like, it's just the chitlins, go back to bed. And since then, we just like, all right, no more in the house, This
is an outside activity.
Yeah, exactly. So just that, when I think of like slices of life, I think of those kinds of scenes, those kinds of like just very quiet everyday moments, and so that informed how I see things, I think, in my work. A lot of, especially like the lifestyle things, the lifestyle images I create, or just images of people existing and celebrating life, and in the quiet moments making a puzzle, or in the loud moments celebrating in a street fair. I think it's all beautiful, and so that kind of informed, and then of course the vibrant colors and all that informed sort of my aesthetic. But as far as my process, a lot of that is, I'll say, my artistic process. It's very informed by the things that, like the media that I take in. I think, for instance, I had read, like, over the pandemic, I was just like, I'm bored. I'm just going to read the Three Musketeers. Why not? Just like the unabridged Three Musketeers. And I read that, and then made a whole series that was like very romantic and very like French and very, my latest series, the solo show that I had in December, Atemporal Artifacts, it's actually an ongoing body of work. I expect to be adding to that throughout my life, but that was inspired by my love of history and museums and culture, and also Afrofuturism and fantasy. I read a lot. Love like Octavia Butler and Kay Jemison. I just finished The Sovereignty of Quiet by Kevin Kwashi, which was really beautiful. And I think a lot of that informs my process as far as like the themes that show up in my work and the colors. Atemporal Artifacts was sort of an amalgamation of a bunch of different like world mythologies that I'm really interested in.
Sure.
So that's how I would say it's just like what am I intaking, and then the work is just sort of like my output with all of that.
It's almost, this is not going to be what you said, but this is the way that I'm seeing it in my head, right? It's almost like, taking in like the different things that we're consuming, right? Media and so on, and being a funnel. It's like, how am I receiving this and how am I bringing it back out there through how I go about things? Actually, you know what? I'm patting myself on the back. That sounded really good.
That's great. That's better than what I said. Yeah, yes.
No. Yours was better.
Summary.
Yours was better. Let's just rob off right now. But here's the thing. I think, when folks listen to like these interviews, right?
Yeah.
I think this is why it's sort of that connection there. Like I like to look at what I'm doing as facilitating storytelling, and I'll have my own quirky whatever in it, and I think that's why it resonates. Like I've talked to different people, curators, and different people who appreciate like visual art, right? And they'll mention like, yeah, technically this is done very well, but I don't feel anything. And I think that's a big piece of it, like the feeling thing. And, when we see something that we can connect with, that you're getting the browns right, as it were, you definitely connect with it in like a sort of like different way.
Yeah, for sure. It's, you can tell when someone is faking the funk, and I think that work that resonates with a lot of people always has an element of truth in it. That's a good tie into I see it. I see truth
I
in
didn't
this
say
art.
anything. I just looked away.
You didn't have to say it. It just is. It's true though, and I think so. You're talking about the browns and the hues. That's an important part of my work because that was an important part of my upbringing. Like I grew up in PG County, so. Everyone around me, or a majority of people around me, and not just like in my sort of class or like status, were Black or people of color. Yeah. So principals, teachers, doctors, all from every level. And that formed my worldview. Yeah. So it was important to me to express that in my work, and it was important to me to accurately express that in my work.
So, could you tell us about that moment or the series of moments that kind of gave you that sort of insight that I'm going to go into visual arts, I'm going to go into photography? This was the thing. Like I touched on before, there were a few different things that I tried before getting to this, and now I'm not letting it go. So, talk about that for yourself.
Yeah. So it was in high school. I tried a bunch of stuff too. I played trumpet for 10 years, and I was like in drama club in high school, and like I did a lot. But so music was my first love, but I thought I wanted to be a fashion designer. I would like sketch illustrations, a women's wear designer specifically. And that also just came from me watching a lot of anime and like loving like the designs and stuff. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Yeah. But I thought I wanted to be a designer, and so I was carrying around like Vogues all the time, and the American Vogues, not even the best Vogue. So I was just carrying them around. And I had an art teacher. Her name was Miss Peterson, and she got sick of it one day. She was like, "Listen, you are always going on and on about Vogue and all. What do you actually love about this?" So she sat me down and opened the magazine and pointed to a spread. And I started describing the colors. I started describing the scene. I started describing the story. And the last thing I talked about was the fashion. And she's like, "It seems like you're more interested in the visual, like the storytelling. I think you should try photography." And so I asked my mom for a camera. She bought me this little digital point and shoot and a printer, a little 4x6 printer in my room. And I just, took my sister, and we had a bunch of extra fabrics, and I was just sort of like incorporating that fashion, that sort of like making gowns or toga, whatever you want to call it, staples and tape. But then I would take that and like, okay, well, what if you're in this forest, you know? And so I would take, I read a lot of fantasy. So I'm like, what if we're in this forest scene or flying in the sky? And so that was what I was exploring. Those are the kinds of themes I was exploring. Then thinking, oh, I'll be a fashion photographer. Yeah. And so up until that point, I was going to be an English teacher. That was my career trajectory, all my academic life, and I still love writing and reading. I love literature. I love teaching. But when it was time to go to college, I was like, maybe I'd like turn down a scholarship somewhere else, and I was like, I want to go be a photographer. And my mom was shook. And my parents were like, sure. It wasn't what they were expecting, but they supported me in that. And so I came to Philly, and 16 years later, I'm still here. And I love what I do. I love photography still, and also I've been able to, in that time, expand in other mediums. And I just but that's how I started. Basically, it's a teacher sat me down and talked me through what it was that I was actually trying to express or trying to get at, and help me find that path.
That's great to have those moments and have sort of someone to sit there with you and seeing like, I think this is actually something you should look at. And then, getting the support from your family, from your mom early on of like, hey, all right, here's this point and shoot. And now if I, like, I don't know how, let's say, high school will have you, right? Like you're like 14. You're like, hey, I want to go onto a podcast. I need this $2,000 worth of equipment. Black parents like, nah.
It's like, use your phone.
Actually,
yeah. Right. Not even phone at that point.
And it's funny because one of the things that I did early on in this sort of vein, I used to be one of those jerks, right? Not like jerk as in, piece of crap, but jerk as in I'm just walking around asking people, putting a mic in someone's face. And I used to have one of the little click and clicks, and it's like, hey, yeah, so you know how we're all getting kicked out of City College, right? Because our grades aren't really good. Are you going to be here next year? Answer, click. I was doing that. That was my
the running gun interview.
That was the beginning of me podcasting.
Interviews. That's great. And now look at you. Still doing the same thing, but
not too much better. Yeah. I mean, that's 24 years ago to really date it. But nice. It's really great to kind of hear some of the sort of like family roots that kind of show up in it and some of those motivations, because I think a lot of times, again, going to what I was touching on earlier, we are what kind of makes up like what our interest is, and I think we always kind of tap back into some of the things that we're still interested in. Like, it's this idea if you return to your square, and you were touching on it a moment ago, so I definitely want to delve deeper into it. You said you could have been an English teacher.
Yeah.
so educator is part of it, and I saw recently, very recently, you've explored the whole realm of education. So do you care to share a bit about that?
Sure.
You're doing, let's see, what do I have here? What do I have here in my notes as my computer freezes on me? I see Fleisher?
Yes.
Fleisher Art Memorial and Mural Arts as a visiting teacher. So what was the inspiration in you like kind of pursuing that in sort of this realm? I see that you're, teaching photography workshops and you're, visiting art teacher. So being a person that's not only working, but also being able to kind of help facilitate and support like that next generation, kind of some of the stuff that you experience, I would imagine, like, hey, you like this part of it. So how's that been for you?
It's been so rewarding. It has been, I think, I feel like it's been a piece of the puzzle that I've been kind of missing in my life professionally, for a while, just because it takes the focus off of me. I'm not really like look at me kind of person. I'm very much like I'll come into the room and kind of stand to the side, but it allows me to be outside of myself and to help other people, and that's part of why I do photography as well, right? Like I'm a portrait photographer specifically because I really love people, like observing humans and like facial features and ethnicities and how those histories and the things that we're tied to like show up in our everyday. So it's been great, and I'll say I feel like I've always, how like, I feel like you've been podcasting or talking to people for a long time. I feel like I've always kind of been teaching just informally, And now that's why it feels so rewarding, is because it's something that's like in the forefront, and I'm present with it. I know as a kid, I was my siblings. Oh man, I was such a nerd as a kid. I had like a collection. Yours were Wizard magazines. I had a collection of National Geographic. Like I had a subscription to National Geographic, and I was like one of those kids, just like have the whole thing, the archive of it. And I would take them and read them. So when my cousins would come over and stuff, my younger cousins, I would go in my room and like read through a magazine, type up a quiz about it, print it out because we had the printer, and I had my stamp. I had my red special stamp, and I had my red pen. I bought myself a red pen, and I would play school in my room, and so I'd have them come in and I'd tell them about the things, and I'm like, this is so cool. It was mostly I wanted to share what I knew and what I found inspiring, and that was the way that I knew how to do it, how to relay information. And so I would quiz them, and then I'd be like, okay, now go play. And they'd like literally just go play video games or whatever. And I'd just be in my stapling my papers and checking, scoring, literally just scoring my family on these things. And I I loved it. I was, I think I like to think they liked it too.
Do you still have the marker you're in?
It's probably in storage somewhere, and now I'm gonna go home and ask my parents, like,
we need that marker.
Where is that? Yeah, I need that.
There's power in that marker.
Yeah, really, seriously. So I think I've always been teaching, but I got the opportunity in 2021. I was at an event and I met this woman, Vita Litvak, and she was at the time I think directing education at Fleisher. Mm-hmm. And she approached me after I had given like a talk on some of the work that I was presenting there, and asked if I'd be interested in teaching some workshops. And I hadn't at that time heard of Fleisher Art Memorial. So I did some research. It seemed like a great place. Went in. It really is a great community. And so I started teaching my first portrait workshop in the fall of last year, in the fall of 2022. I'm like, what year are we in?
You're right. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. Time is an illusion.
Flat circle? No.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of references happening.
Yeah, so many. So I started that, and my first workshop was a portrait workshop, but it was like called The Art of Portraiture, and I think the goal of it was to sort of teach. The initial goal of it was to teach technical skills of the camera. But what I found I was more interested in is the cultural context of portraiture and how it shows up in our everyday lives, and helping people to find their own connection to it. And so what it ended up turning into was kind of like a history of portraiture class with some sort of like discovery and mixed in. So there would be 3-hour long workshops at a time, like 5 weeks long, 3 hours per session. And I would do like a lecture for the first part of it, and then the second part I'd have like an exercise that we go through, like these different types of lighting techniques. Now go play. Like I'll show them to them, and like now see what you can come up with with one another. And I really loved it because you get to see people's wheels turning. You get to see when the light bulbs go off, when they're just like, oh, I didn't know I could do this, and you also get to see the growth in it. Like people come in really intimidated by photography, really intimidated by the technical aspects, and really sort of hindered mentally with what they feel like they can do, what they're capable of a lot of times. And then it's just with discovery, with play, with creating a safe environment for them to learn and explore, you get to see them come out of that. And then by the end of it, they're just like, one of my students in my last workshop, she's like, I didn't really consider myself a photographer before, but now I feel like I'm in it. I feel like I'm a photographer now, and I can say that with confidence. Yeah. And that just like warmed my heart. It's just like, and then someone else was just like, I didn't have a way to connect with my friends outside of drinking, and some of us are sober now. And now, like with these new portrait like assignments, I was going out and like, we had another reason to connect, and it just like opened up so many things for us. And I love that. I love being a part of that, and I'm learning too, and I'm a lifelong learner. So I'm loving learning by teaching.
Thank you. It sounds like we're it sounds like it's sort of like going deeper each time. Like, hey, this is what the technical, like, so as far as the workshop went, this is sort of the technical. Now let's go further into it, and it now turns into more of the history component around it, and it just makes me think of that scenario you were describing with your teacher back in the day. It's like, we're going to go deeper, and I think about, in bringing it to this, because this is how I relate, like, with the creative thing that I do, of, like, what are the things that I like my start in podcasting was me talking about sort of the goofy news stories that people don't talk too much about, like those segments from like a morning like radio programs, like this weird thing happened here. I'm like, what if there was a whole podcast of this? And going deeper and doing sort of the research, and then looking over from, instead of just in my city and instead of my region or my country or whatever, but looking at in the world and seeing those things and just going deeper and deeper. And even when I approach this, like, there's a certain degree of research. Like, there'll be, I love when I'm listening to, when I'm talking with someone and I ask them a question, so how'd you find out about that? I was like, I'd be looking, man. I'd be digging. Right. It's like, man, that was from 2005. I know. You messy. or even, some of the process that just goes in, it's a couple of hours worth of research that goes into it, but really trying to figure out, like, that point of, like, what's going deep and trying to, like, show off sort of that knowledge, because some people do that too. It's like, I know so much, and it's like, cool, but are you kind of sparking that interest for going further? So, like, sometimes when I'm doing these interviews and I'll reach out and I'll send over the questions or whatever to the guests, I'm like, this is not going to be the all-encompassing, like, we're not going to get one's life story in like 40 minutes, but we might get enough that someone's like, let me check out your work. Let me dive deeper, or let me highlight these parts of what goes into my background. Those are the things that's interesting, at least from my standpoint. What is an artist thinking of? Yeah, sure, let's talk about that process, but what's on their mind? How do they go about their work? That's the thing that's really interesting to me, because I always say, I'm not an art guy. Okay. Even though people correct me, it's like, are you not?
I'm curious about that, because and I'll say also, my students, what I love. So some of my students are adults at Fleisher. They're all adults, but in the Mural Arts, they're all teens. And I had a student. I came in the first day for this workshop at this center, and the girl, she knew I was coming, and she had her face painted. I mean, like, just all this like cool markings and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, are you an artist? No. And I'm like, okay. And then I look over and she's sketching on the paper. Yeah. And then she's like, do you want to hear the song I wrote?
You're like, hold on, what?
And I'm like, wait a minute. You just said you're not an artist, but let's unpack that. Why do you feel like you're not an artist? So why do you feel like you're not an art person? As a creative entrepreneur. With tattoos. Why do you feel like, with a comic lover.
With Doc Martens on. Right. I just think it's a, I think it's a little bit more being conditioned to being more of a rarefied thing, and I know there's a lot to unpack in that sort of thing, but rarefied feels like it's the thing. And I think there's I approach this artistically, but I'm emerging. I'll say that I'm more of an emerging guy in that area. Been doing it for a long time, but still think I'm emerging. So, I play with that idea. Am I an art guy? Am I not? You talk to me at the right time. Man, I'm an artist. I'm the greatest thing since everything. It's like, all right. It's like, is this a Coke rant? What are you saying? Yeah. But on the other side of it, it is sort of this kind of consistent creative confidence conversation that I think, and almost ironically speaking, almost any artist runs into.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was describing with the students who didn't think they were artists, or and then also just that confidence is key. Like the student who was just like, I didn't think I was a photographer before, but now I am. She was always a photographer, right? She was always making these. She always had these images and these skills in her head. Like it's just. Yeah, the way that we're conditioned to see the arts, and especially just like, I feel like now we're in a better space to be an artist and be supported and make a living from it. In a lot of ways, but a lot of people see when they like artsy fartsy is a term for a reason, right?
Yeah.
They like just don't take it seriously, or they think it's whatever, or they think artists always have to be poor, or artists always have to look a certain way, or know a certain set of things. But it really, I feel like all of us are creative, and as far as like you're mentioning, like you feel like you're still emerging, I feel like that's life. I feel like we're always still emerging. We're always still learning. There's never a point in what I feel like if you reach the point where you're not curious, then I feel like you may be done. You know, but if you're still curious, if you're still learning, if you're still open to things, open to new concepts and ideas, I feel like the sky is the limit, and creativity like helps facilitate that. I think in so many ways, facilitate that curiosity. Yeah, I could go on and on.
That's great, and it actually, and thank you. That's really good. I was going to say a Biggie reference, but you know, I'm good. Scott's on. So I want to ask you this last question, and then I got a few rapid fire questions to rock with you if those are good.
Sure.
So this one, and you know, I just want to hear a little bit about being a Mural Arts Black Arts Fellow, and Black Arts Fellow, and what is it like that you love about being a artist based in Philly, like being in that space? Because like getting sort of the Mural Arts thing, that's a name, that's a rarefied name.
Yes. Now that's an institution.
Yes,
that's like a legacy. You know, and it's interesting. So I've been in Philly for a while. I came here for college for photography, but I hadn't really, like, Mural Arts was never really like specifically on my radar until maybe like 5 or so years ago. And that was mostly because I felt like they weren't for me. I'm like I'm image based in photography, so a lot of it was like a lot of my work is in print. I was like, oh, I'm not a painter, I'm not an illustrator, so I'm not like they're not checking for me in Mural Arts. I couldn't have been farther, you know, from the truth, and it really is like an all-encompassing sort of entity, and which I've really come to appreciate. But being a Black Arts Fellow, I was part of I think the second cohort of Mural Arts, the Black Arts Fellowship. That was in 2021, and it's really changed so much of my practice, of my social network, of my outlook on things, and for the better, you know. And I'm very grateful for that, for like being sort of brought into this network, because it really is a wonderful network and very, very diverse. But yeah, and shout out to Makiba. She was the artist who recommended that I applied and then stayed on me, because I mean I will forget. So it was like the night before, I think I submitted my application, and then like just didn't think I would get it, because I was like, oh, it's Mural Arts, whatever. Like they're looking for painters and illustrators and designers. Nobody's checking for photography, really, or not for what I was doing. It was what I thought. And then when I got the call for that, I was having it was a really down day. I was like, just in one of those moments where I was just like, I'm gonna give this up. I'm just gonna get like a 9 to 5. I'm just gonna like go into tech, you know, just so I can whatever change my circumstances, because I just wasn't like happy. I didn't feel inspired, or like photography could give me what I felt like I wanted at the time. And then I got the call for that. And literally, I was just like in tears, just like, and I you know, I'm not ashamed about that, but yeah, it just really kind of reinvigorated so much for me, and I've found like my cohort specifically, I felt, I mean, it was so strong. And such a range of people. I mean, there was a walking artist, and that was the first time I'd even been introduced to that as a field, and apparently it's a thing, you know. And so he would walk these historical trails, you know, like slave routes and Underground Railroad and things like that, and meditate on that, and people would fund that. Wow. And it was just so inspiring that just like there's so many different ways to be an artist and to express yourself and to make a difference and explore the things that you love. Yeah. and then be supported for it, which was really, really cool. So I've developed some really tight bonds with a core group of some of my cohort, and they've been integral. I just took a class by Yannick Lowry. He was like one of the cohorts in one of the fellows in my cohort. And he was teaching a collage class at Fleisher. And I'd never done collage, but it just opened up a whole new world for me now for what my own work, being image-based. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's been really dope. I felt like I found a support network. I found like a platform to be able to share what I do with more people. I feel like that is probably, I wouldn't be sitting here, talking to you if I hadn't been involved with Mural Arts.
Your name is Robert. You'd be here.
Yeah, right? Well, our name means bright fame.
I mentioned that earlier to Emilio, by the way.
Mm-hmm. I know he hated that.
He was like, I disagree. I was like,
yeah, he's going to disagree on anything. So, I don't hold to that, whatever. It's just a fun fact. It's just been it's been great being in Mural Arts. And as far as what my favorite thing about the art scene, being an artist in Philly, is I think it is I'll say it's the access to the arts. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's surrounding us, and I know a lot of cities have an art scene, but Philly feels very grounded. Philly feels like I've been here for a while, but it feels like it's an excellent city as an incubator for artists because there's room to explore. There is I'm gonna knock on wood here if I can find some wood, but it's affordable,
Well,
right. LOL.
Knock on gold.
Right. Seriously. So I found like that was an integral part as well of like, because I have a small studio, but we pour a lot into our craft, and you're not always able to do that in like bigger cities if you don't come from means, and I definitely do not come from means, So I was able to cut my teeth here in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of access in Philly where we're a very passionate city. I feel like people always think of the sports fans when they think of Philly. They got your Flyers, you got your Eagles, but the artists are equally as passionate, and that is one of my favorite things about the city. Yeah,
that's dope. Thank you. So before we wrap up here, I got 2 rapid fire questions for you. So I hope you're ready.
Sure. Yeah.
Favorite color?
Right now, blue.
Okay.
I'm like, oh,
you're being an artist about it.
I know. I'm like, oh, is it cobalt
Pantone,
or is it like a French blue right now? Maybe it's cerulean.
Wow.
I don't know, but
That's great.
blue right now.
All right. This is sort of the last one. What are you more likely to start your day with? Coffee, tea, or other? Because someone gave me a really interesting answer earlier, and I'm going to leave other as an option.
Yeah. Rapid fire. Oh, right. So tea. Okay. But I'm not opposed to any of the other options.
Okay. Nice. So that's pretty much it. I want to thank you for being on the pod.
Of course.
And 2, I want to invite and encourage you to tell the fine folks where they can check you out, social media, website, all of that good stuff. The floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you. This has been great. It feels like we just like breezed by. There's so much more. But
we left some on the table.
Yeah. My website is rcarterphoto.com. Not Art Carter, but R, just the letter R. I get that a lot. And then my Instagram is the same, R Carter Photo, and also R Carter Studios. They're kind of separated. Photo is more my artistic, and studios is more my like commercial portraiture in classes. And yeah, that's where I am online. I have a show coming up actually, a group show in May, with a group that I'm really excited about. It's a diasporic show. And it's about like how the things that connect us across the diaspora. So I'm really, really excited about that. And I'm actually not showing photography in that for the first time. So yeah, really excited.
Something new to look forward to.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to share too much, but yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, follow that social media and that website, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Robert Carter for coming onto the podcast and spinning a bit of yarn with me. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art and culture in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.